First of all, I want to thank Dr. Tennant, who is the president of Asbury Theological Seminary. Well, you'll remember Pastor Julie just graduated from, and where I did some of my final training as well. He gave me this idea, but it touched a point in me that I think it was meant to bless you as well. You've all heard of a marathon. It represents one of the highest standards of human strength and endurance. It happens to be 26.2 miles for those of you non-runners. And you might ask why. It's because of a Greek legend. In 490 BC, there is the story of a great win of the Greeks over the Persian army that was totally unexpected. So the Greeks sent a messenger who ran from a city known as Marathon all the way to Athens to bring the news of the important Greek victory. Now, dramatically, he gets to Athens, he delivers the message, he collapses and dies. And so everybody thought that was the farthest anybody could run. So the Olympics established this race, which has remained the gold standard for runners, not just in the Olympics, but everywhere. You know you're a real runner if you can run a marathon. One of the holy grails of marathon runners is to try to break the 2-hour mark. I remember a time when they thought you couldn't break the speed of sound, and then you hear a sonic boom and you know it's happened. I remember when the 2-minute mile was but a gleam in the eye of athletes. And we all know that's happened. Well, the 2-hour mark so far, the most current official fastest time is 2 hours, 1 minute, and 39 seconds. It's held by a Kenyan runner, and he actually did break the 2-hour marathon in Vienna in 2019. But since it wasn't an official race, nobody counts it. But it can be done. In 1968, there was a Summer Olympics in Mexico City. It was one of the highlights of the marathon. If you had to be in the stands at the end of that race, you would have been there and seen 3 multicultural winners. You had the first place going to Ethiopia, the second place from Japan, and the third place from New Zealand. And everybody thought that is the spirit of the Olympics. And it was an amazing story. Most of the audience left after the anthems had played, and about an hour later, another runner crosses the line. His name is John Stephen Akwari. He's from Tanzania, and he enters the stadium because it's so late because at the 19-kilometer mark, he had some cramping from the high altitude because back in Tanzania, he couldn't train in high altitude like the altitude of Mexico City. That cramping caused him to swerve, and unexpectedly, he was hit by another runner. He fell down. He was badly injured. His knee was dislocated. His shoulder was wounded, and he got up and he kept running. Even though he was in pain, even though he was limping, he continued to run, and he entered the stadium a full hour after the victors had entered. He was the official last place finisher. 18 had quit entirely that day. So he was the 57th among 75 who started. People were amazed to see him enter the stadium in such pain. So reporters run back into the scene. They ask him questions. They want to know why. Why did he run when he was in such obvious pain? His answer was interesting. He said, "My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start the race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish the race." The word marathon has come to mean anything long, hard, sustained, anything that takes that kind of effort, that discipline. And Christianity, Paul refers to as the race. I want you to think about that as you think about this desire to do what is right, but maybe you've been knocked down. Maybe you didn't train in the way you wish you had. Maybe you didn't have the opportunity to train in the way you wish you had. Maybe everybody has told you what you think God is calling you to do is impossible. and it hurts and you're tired and it's painful and you just are heartbroken. Many Christians begin with zeal and get fatigued or injured, and some drop out, and some get up and keep on running, even with a limp. Remember the limp that our forefather Jacob had after he wrestled with God? Maybe some of you feel limping. Maybe some of you were discouraged or wounded. Maybe you feel underappreciated or lonely, or wonder if even God might have forgotten you. Christians are derided in our country. There's many churches that are languishing, and some of you, your pain is just so great. Maybe, perhaps, some secret sin has crept back into your life and you're morally wounded, not only physically and emotionally or mentally wounded, but morally wounded, and you're not even sure you deserve to stay in the race. I want you to remember the grace of the God who called you. Remember the utter lostness of the world. Remember the devil has tried to discourage you and reclaim you, but you belong to Jesus. You reclaim that heritage. God did not call you from the distant country of sin to start this marathon called ministry, called a Christian life, called a light into the world. He called you to complete it. Jacob walked with a limp, but even that testimony that God is not through with you, it means something to us. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus and run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking not to ourselves, not to grow weary or faint-hearted, but to look always to Jesus, as Hebrews 12 reminds us to, in that faith promise of how we live forward. So my question to you, for you to ponder for your devotional today, is how far will you go when you aren't the one getting the accolades, when you aren't the one being recognized and your anthem isn't being sung? How far will you go to finish your part in the race for Jesus so that he can tell you one day, "Well done, good and faithful servant"?